Hi, and welcome to this second lesson in the Intuition Summer School for 2023 with me, Ruth Ann Richards. I'm the creator of The Intuition Connection, author of Reclaim Your Intuition, and I believe that when we're deeply connected to our intuition, life gets easier and we feel empowered. And I would love more people, especially women, to feel that way. I think that we've lost our connection to intuition or that we no longer trust it. And that's part of the reason I'm running summer school, hosting summer school this year, is to encourage you to think more about intuition and to reclaim that connection for yourself. Now, I love talking about this stuff and can easily go off at a tangent. So I've got my notes here to keep me on track. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm checking my notes that I'm staying on point. So this week's lesson is about the otherworldly. It's about what we believe, it's about belief systems, it's about spirituality, and everything in between. Now, I use the term otherworldly very loosely to explain all the things that are out there in the cosmos that we can't see or touch, that our physical senses can't help us with. But yet we feel there's something out there that we can't see that can help us with our life today, that can connect us to something much more meaningful. And that's what we're doing this week. So last week we focused on what is intuition and where does it come from, and we went pretty deep there. We're going a bit deeper this week now to look at the otherworldly. So find yourself a comfy space with a cuppa. Maybe you want a pen and a journal to make some notes. Avoid interruptions if you can. Turn your phone off. Get yourself cozy and get ready for the otherworldly. One of the purposes of the Intuition Connection is to create space and hold space, to talk about the things that are really important and meaningful, but we just don't get to talk about on a day-to-day basis. So I want to create some space before we get into the otherworldly to talk about conditioning, and for you to think about your own conditioning in terms of the otherworldly, religion and spirituality. And by conditioning in this context, I'm talking about the beliefs that were passed on to us as children, what exposure we had to religion as a child or to spirituality or the otherworldly. What did we experience? And do you remember how you felt about all those experiences and that conditioning when you were growing up? The reason I'm starting with these questions is that for us to get to grips with what we choose to believe as adults, it may mean leaving behind some of the conditioning and some of the beliefs that we've held for a long time as children. So let me give you an example. My conditioning is that I was sent to Sunday school every Sunday. And growing up as a child, my mum was involved in a lot of church activities. And it was mainly, well, it was all Church of England and Protestant, but we went to Methodist, United Reformed. There were a number of churches that we went to before my mum settled on one. I was in the choir at one point, which was ridiculous because I can't sing a note in tune. And I was also roped into helping with Sunday school, which was kind of great looking after the kids, but I was never really a Sunday school teacher. So as a child and early teenager, this is just what we did. I didn't rebel about it, I didn't question it until my early adult years. And part of the reason I didn't was it was society for us, it was community. There were people my age, there were people my mum's age. It was something to do, but I never questioned it. I never liked the services or the rituals though, but I did internally probably have some questions about, is there a God in heaven looking down on us? Because as a child, I think that was probably a bit freaky. So that's the example of my conditioning and upbringing with what I would consider part of the otherworldly, and mainly my experience with organised religion. However, as I was growing up, I had another connection to the otherworldly, which was more powerful and potent, but which I didn't understand until I was much older. Now, I know what I experienced as a child as intuition, receiving messages and signs from the otherworldly, but I never connected that to a religion or with God, and I still don't make that connection as an adult. The intuition for me was something very separate to this organised structure that I was placed in, supposedly to believe about something that I was just told I had to have faith in. So if you want to pause this lesson here to have time to consider your own condition and experiences and even make some notes in a journal, please do trust your instinct here. Because next we're going to move on to more in-depth belief systems and spirituality. Here we go. I'm going to start our in-depth exploration, and when I say in-depth, we're going to cover the surface of some in-depth topics with metaphysics and spirituality, because this is where I feel the concept of the universe fits in, and because I find it really interesting. If the word metaphysics is new to you, let me help you understand what it means. In regular science, physics is about the laws that govern the physical world. So the laws that govern gravity or radio waves or microwaves, it's all those things as to how physicists and scientists explain kind of how things work on Earth and to some extent how the universe works. And when you think of physics like that, we can see that it kind of touches on dealing with the otherworldly. So gravity, how does gravity work? We don't see it, yet we believe it exists because someone's put a theory forward for it. It deals in concepts that it's fairly easy for us to believe in because scientists have some proof of it. And if they don't have exact proof, they have a good enough theory to demonstrate why it would be true. However, we don't see those things, we don't touch them or feel them, we only experience them. And we don't even appreciate that we're experiencing gravity because we just take it for granted because we can't see it. Metaphysics goes beyond describing something and starts to ask questions about the nature of it and the meaning of it. For example, rather than just assuming that gravity exists to keep us all bound on Earth and upright, that's a very basic example, it would ask, well, where does gravity come from? Was it created by a god? Or was it part of a big bang that created the cosmos? And if there is a god, is there more than one god? And where does God live? And how do we connect with this God? So metaphysics takes us into deeper philosophical questions and conversations about the existence of the things that we cannot see, and to ask questions about their existence and coming into being. But more importantly, metaphysics is concerned with, is there a supreme deity? And it's looking for evidence to say, this is why a supreme deity exists, but equally, here's the evidence that says it wouldn't. And it's looking at everything in between in terms of the otherworldly. So now you can see why metaphysics is a term used a lot in spirituality, because it's about asking questions and it gives us a framework in order to say, well, no, there is no what we would consider scientific evidence for a God to exist or for a deity or a supreme being to exist. But actually I can still choose to believe in it because I may have personal experience that tells me that there is a supreme deity. So science gives us this evidence based on these large experiments that it's looking to prove that something exists or that something is available like gravity, even if we can't see it. But we get to ask our own questions as well. Now, metaphysics is a centuries-old debate and still happening today about the existence of a supreme being or not. But in our contemporary society today, metaphysics has become the term used for spiritual people to accept the concept of something otherworldly, but not necessarily a supreme deity or a god, but something otherworldly within the cosmos or the universe that can guide us, that can help us, that we can connect to find out more about. And metaphysics is a great term to help you if you consider yourself to be spiritual but not religious. This metaphysical view about the otherworldly could be one way to explain and understand your own belief, views and thoughts about the otherworldly. That yes, I am spiritual. I think there is something metaphysical around us that we can't see or touch, but there's something there. But you don't necessarily believe that it would be a god or a supreme deity. So that frames how we can use the concept of connecting with the universe, co-creating with the universe. But let's move on to something more meaningful now, and let's look at religion and spirituality. Let's hit the big topic and talk about religion. Because of my beliefs, who I am and what I do, I know a lot of people who are triggered by the thought of religion, but be assured I'm going to explore this in a very gentle way and to deconstruct what is meant by religion. But I have to admit my own bias here. I'm not religious, and I do not believe in the concept of a god or a supreme being. I do, however, love a lot of the Indian ancestry, legends or myths or truths about the different gods that they have. Having more different gods would make sense to me because the universe is such a complex place. But in terms of do I believe in a god, I'm just declaring with you my belief here. But we can still look at religion because it's important to know that even if we had this upbringing as a child of going to Sunday school and just being born into a family where religion was something that we did, is it still valid when we're older? And if it is still valid for you, that's great. But I'm covering it here because as an adult, it's important that you choose. And it's important that you choose what to believe rather than just going through the conditioning and the motions. And I guess the first thing to say about religion is there's a lot of brands out there. There's Protestant, which includes a variety of others, such as Roman Catholicism, if I can't even say it, Roman Catholics. There's a Jewish faith, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, and there are more. But those are the ones for me when I thought about religions, were the ones that came to my mind first. But let's clean the slate and strip religion back to an essential meaning or philosophy. Religion involves the worship or praying to a deity or deities, and that deity is considered to have special powers. The worship usually includes collective and communal rituals and service and ceremonies, often held in a special building built specifically for the purpose of those ceremonies, services and rituals. There's often a text or collective works or writings that guide the religion and the life of its followers, for example, the Bible or the Quran. And there's an organisation to religion, which includes leaders, those who have studied and been ordained or have been conferred with powers to lead a group in a particular religion. So when I think about religion and I want to strip it back, those are the bare essentials that I came up with. And all that sounds pretty okay when you strip it back. A more refined definition is that religion is a set of beliefs concerning the cause, nature and purpose of the universe, especially when considered as the creation of a superhuman agency or agencies, usually involving devotional and ritual observances and often containing a moral code governing the conduct of human affairs. Being as subjective as I can be, my version of stripping it back and the definition I've just read to you sounds fine. It sounds simple and it sounds straightforward. So why do I and other people I know push back against it so much? It's because we're human. And whilst these descriptions are perfectly acceptable, we likely know situations where leaders have abused their powers. And as women, we may push back against religion as well because it all feels too patriarchal. There's no equality. There's nothing that allows women, their sense of freedom and to speak freely. And it's this knowledge that we've gained about religion over our lifetime that has become part of our conditioning. And that knowledge generally is about bad experiences that either we've had or we know that other people have had. And it's about our view of any church, religion or group, about the money they hold, the land they hold, about how they treat the people within their communities, about how they impose the beliefs, how strictly they impose the beliefs. Some people completely believe the Bible is exactly the stories that are in it, and some people believe it's metaphorical. So it's our experiences and the knowledge that we've gained that may push us back against from religion. However, there are people who have positive experiences with organised religion. There may be a sense of psychological safety to be with a group and a community of like-minded people that you feel have the same beliefs and backgrounds and views as you. And people have their own evidence and experience of praying and having their prayers answered. And that creates a belief that there is a God helping and supporting them. and that's okay. Now, that's a very short summary about a very big topic. There's a lot more that I could say, but I'm going to leave it here for now and allow you to consider your own thoughts and beliefs, particularly in light of your conditioning when you were younger. So that's religion. We're going to move on to something different now, and we're going to take a bit more of a science view. In our contemporary society today, we feel there is a divide between religion and science. Now, it hasn't always been like that, but that's how we experience it today. And so we've briefly looked at religion, but we're going to look now at what science has to say about the otherworldly. And I call this a quantum approach. Now, as you can likely guess, I'm not a scientist, but I do have a big interest in science, and particularly in anything quantum related, because this helps us understand how the cosmos works. And in my own quest to help understand what I believe, I read a lot about quantum physics, quantum mechanics, because it stirred up in me this interest of wanting to know how it works and what is my place in this. So in this section, I'm giving you my interpretation of what I've learned, and that's my disclosure. This is not a scientific fact. I'm interpreting some of the things that I've learned, and if you want to read more, there'll be information at the end to let you know where you can go to do that. But what I have learned is that a lot of quantum studies are about matter, especially the smallest pieces of matter that exist and usually not visible to the naked eye. Now, I'm using matter in this sense as a collective term for neutrons, protons, quarks, molecules, atoms, all those things that exist that I can't name because I'm a scientist. But I'm including all those as a sense of matter. It's something that exists that we can't touch and we can't always see it. And by the very nature of quantum studies, scientists are looking at how the universe works with the small things, because that's what quantum is, it's about the small things. And one of the key findings from quantum science is something called the quantum field. Now, other terms for it are the universal field or the unified field, but for now, I'm going to stick with the quantum field. And this is where it gets a bit Star Trek-y. Quantum field is a field within the cosmos that's invisible. And this invisible field contains energy and information that we can't see. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because according to physics, anything and everything can happen in the quantum field. Now, I find that really exciting. So here's this invisible field in the cosmos that contains energy and information that we can't see. So the energy and information is moving in waves. So we know that radio waves exist, we know that microwaves exist, but we don't see those waves. So it's the same with this energy and information that's in this field that we can't see. So the idea that anything and everything can happen in the quantum field, I think is really cool. Because if anything can happen, amazing things can happen. So when you heard the phrase, anything and everything can happen in the quantum field, did you go to worst case scenario, or did you think, oh, this is fantastic because amazing things can happen here? But what really intrigues me as someone with a spiritual aspect to my life is that all that information and energy is reacting to everything all the time. So let me tell you more. All that information and energy gets mixed up together. And the best way to explain how it gets mixed up is something called entanglement theory. Now, there are loads of videos by scientists on YouTube explaining entanglement theory that you can go and watch. But here is my non-scientist understanding of it. Imagine two particles. One particle is called Fred, the other particle is called Ginger. Fred and Ginger are in different places and they are thousands of miles apart. Yet they can still send information to one another and react to that information. So let's imagine Fred is a particle 5,000 miles away from Ginger. And Fred's particle is exposed to some light. And that light information means Fred starts dancing. His particle changes its state because he's dancing. And that's his reaction to that information. The ginger particle, thousands of miles away, can change its state too, reacting to the state that Fred has now moved into after experiencing this light, and can match Fred's state. So thousands of miles away, these two particles can react and communicate with each other. Now, I got really excited when I first learned about entanglement theory, because this to me was kind of like the penny drop, and it's how can I know the things that I know that are happening in other places and not near me? How can that just even be possible? So this idea of entanglement theory really relaxed me, and it helped me understand that there is some scientific explanation and it's feasible. If everything in the world is connected, and once it's connected it creates energy, I am tapping into and feeding from that energy and reacting to that state. So that's how I can know. It's really interesting because as you read more about entanglement theory, one of the things that you'll learn is that Einstein called this spooky action at a distance, because in terms of physics laws and physical laws, something like this should not be possible. Yet it happens, and experiments have been done numerous times to prove that entanglement theory, and that is the case. Einstein may have called it spooky action at a distance, but all I can tell you is to some of us, this is absolutely the norm. Now, as I said at the start, this is my interpretation. It's a very basic one because I've had to distill this stuff down to a way that I can understand it, and I hope it helps you understand it too. But as I said, if you're curious to read more, there'll be some information at the end of the lesson, and you can always go on YouTube and just search entanglement theory, and you'll find plenty more to see. Now, I love it when science catches up with concepts and belief and philosophies that have existed in ancient history and in ancient spiritual history for millennia. So from the quantum approach and the quantum field, now I want to talk to you about the Akashic field. So if you're ready to have your minds blown, here we go. You may already know about the Akashic field, but if you don't, let me just start with what the Akashic field is. It's something that in spiritual terms has been known for millennia, and it's probably been described in different ways at different times, but it's something that is mystical and spiritual and otherworldly. Now, the term Akasha is thought to be an old Sanskrit word, or derived from a Sanskrit word, Akasha, which is a term to describe the ethers, something ethereal. So for me, that perfectly describes the otherworldly. And the Akashic field holds all information, past, present, and future. It's like a cloud. It's like what we consider the cloud to be today, except it doesn't need all the machinery and equipment that the cloud needs to keep going. So obviously it's much more environmentally friendly. But when you think about the Akashic field held in the past, present, future of all information, doesn't it just make you think about the quantum field a little bit? It certainly did me. Now, when you start to learn about ancient traditions around the world and throughout history, this field comes up all the time, maybe with a different name, but always with the same meaning, an invisible, mystical, spiritual place that holds the essence of humanity, it holds information, it contains the energy and the knowledge of all time, of all living things. But more importantly, in spiritual terms, this is an invisible field we can connect to. We can connect to that information, to speak with it, to learn about our ancestors, to know about the past, to understand the present, and for those who are called to and courageous enough to connect, to look at the potentiality of the future. Not to predict the future, because things change all the time and things exist in potentiality, so we're always looking at the potential. The information in the Akashic field is often called the Akashic records, and the Akashic records are held in a library. Now, my view is that the Akashic records, the Akashic library, these words and concepts exist to help us make the Akashic field feel real, because it's not something we can see in our visible existence. So it's very difficult to imagine a field that contains all this energy when we can't see it. It's the idea of there is a library, an Akashic library, that holds the Akashic records of all time in this Akashic field, is a simplistic way to help humans create this field in their imagination. So another way that science is catching up with spirituality is that all this information in the Akashic field has this vibrational frequency. Now, in science, you can learn that all matter, has a vibrational frequency. And again, that's difficult for us to believe because we think objects are solid. But actually, when you get down to the tiny, tiny, tiny little pieces of atoms and matter, they do move, everything moves. So again, this idea that science is catching up with spirituality in terms of that vibrational frequency is information, and when information connects, it creates energy. I think the Akashic field is really important in spirituality because it's a lovely explanation of the otherworldly. Now, I remember being in disbelief when I first learned about it because it just blew my mind and I just couldn't grasp the concept of something that could exist that I couldn't see. But now I find it quite comforting, and I'm grateful for the information it can give me to help me understand more about my life and making decisions in the present. If this is the first time you're learning about the Akashic field and it's blown your mind, please do not get worked up about it. Remember, you get to choose whether or not you want to believe this or not. So if this does not appeal to you or it freaks you out, then you can choose not to believe it, or you can just suspend judgment for now. And we'll move on to the next thing, which is a psychological approach. So I'm going to talk about a psychological approach now, and this is something I like because I'm interested in psychology, so again, disclosure about my bias. But it's also, psychology is science-based, but there's also something about the human spirit and the human experience in this as well. And it starts with Carl Jung. And Carl Jung was a psychologist and considered to be the founding father of analytical psychology. And he created the theory of the collective unconscious. So he proposed that the collective unconscious is a layer of our unconscious mind, and that layer connects each of us to the history of thoughts and behaviours of all humankind. So not just all the humankind that's living on the planet in the same time as us right now, but of all humankind throughout history. So I'm going to say that again. He proposed that the collective unconscious is a layer of our unconscious mind, and that layer connects each of us to the history of thoughts and behaviours of all humankind. Now, he proposed this about 100 years ago, so in our contemporary society today, we accept the meaning of having a conscious mind, unconscious, subconscious. It highlights these different parts of us. So what he's saying is there is a collective unconscious that exists in the world that's made up of a layer of each of our unconscious minds. So that collective unconscious is out there in the universe, exists as this field, for want of a better word, out there in the universe. And again, for me, it provides a way of explaining how can we know the things that we don't know how we know, because we're tapping into a layer of unconsciousness that has come from someone or somewhere else. Still intangible, but it's a great explanation. For me, this connection to the history and thoughts, behaviours of all humankind does speak to a consciousness that exists in the universe. And if you're thinking about this information and it's taking you back to the quantum field and the Akashic field, it means that you're starting to understand that there are many different ways to explain the same thing. There's many different ways to explain the otherworldly. And it's about finding the explanation that most resonates with you based on your personal biases and your interests and what feels easiest for you to absorb. Maybe the description of the quantum field and the akashic field do not resonate with you, but psychology feels like a very modern scientific discipline to you, and maybe that makes sense to you in a way that you can relate to more easily. In the case of connecting to this collective unconscious, hypnosis is a method that was often used to allow individuals to connect, and it was guided hypnosis. However, I believe that meditation is, whatever your belief about the otherworldly is, I believe that meditation is a key way to connect with the otherworldly. And that we're in that hypnotic state of not quite awake and not quite asleep. There's a magical place there that allows us to connect to the otherworldly. And I believe that with enough practice, each one of us can do that. Now, maybe all these approaches make sense to you, maybe one resonates more than the other. So just listen to your own instinct and what's calling to you from your soul. Now, in the next section, I'm going to talk to you about how I shaped my own beliefs based on learning about some of the things that I've just shared with you, and I call it the spirit of the universe. So if you've listened to some of these explanations about the otherworldly, and you're doing a bit of a pick and mix about things you like and things that don't resonate, that's perfectly okay in my view, because it's more or less what I did to reach my own conclusion beliefs about the otherworldly and about my intuition and why I was learning things that I couldn't, or being told things I couldn't have known. And I call it the spirit of the universe. I love the idea that there's a collective consciousness or unconsciousness within the universe, and that this feeds the akashic field or the quantum field with all information, thoughts, and consciousness of all souls through all time. That's what I like to believe. So sometimes I might call it the akashic field, sometimes I might call it the unified field, but for me, it's all one and the same thing. It's this amazing space that exists that we can't see, but holds everything that's happened throughout history. I believe that we can connect to that field, but that way back in time, our ancestors could do this easily and naturally. But as our planet has gone through all kinds of industrial, chemical, agricultural, and technological revolutions, society has changed, and we've lost this innate ability. I believe we can learn it again, which is why I wrote the book Reclaim Your Intuition. My belief in the spirit of the universe extends to anything can happen, and I find that exciting because being a cup half full kind of person, that means anything wonderful can happen at any time, and that fills me with hope. And because anything can happen at any time, I fully believe in synchronicity. There's no such thing as coincidence, and things happen for a reason. And when it comes to our human experience, I believe we have free will choice and the ability to think freely. Sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes it's not. There are times when we need intuition to help us make the right choices. I think we do each have a destiny in this lifetime on Earth, and the spirit of the universe can guide us towards it if we are open. For me, that does not impact our free will choice. It merely enhances it for us to make the right choices for ourselves. But with free will choice comes personal responsibility. If we trust our intuition to make a choice and something doesn't work out the way we wanted, we have to take responsibility for making that choice. We do not blame the otherworldly. We do not blame anyone else for the choices that we make. In fact, quite often it works out later. The timing was just wrong, or we misread the signs more often than not. To be spiritually free and connected to the otherworldly, it's imperative we take personal responsibility for all that we do. Intellectually and spiritually, I believe that everything is connected, and that is the starting point for everything. That's what helps you understand how intuition can work, how it can be possible. There's this view out there that everything is energy, but that's not completely correct. Energy has to be created, and it cannot be created until things are connected. Whether it's particles or humans, a connection has to be made for energy to exist. If more of us believed that everything is connected, I truly believe that we can start to change the world. So thank you for watching this second lesson on the otherworldly. It's been a quick tour on some deep subjects at a high level just to give you a taster. But I hope it's got you thinking about your own childhood beliefs and what you want to believe now as an adult, and to let go of some of the things that no longer serve you. I hope your perceptions have been challenged in a good way, and maybe you've learnt something new, or you've learnt something about that you want to go away and read more about. But I hope it's made you think about the otherworldly in different ways. So join me next time for lesson 3, which is about coherence and how coherence helps us embrace intuition into our daily lives. I'll see you then. Bye.